It was a quiet evening in their cozy home, the kind of evening where everything seemed in its right place. Samantha had just finished preparing dinner, the aroma of her homemade spaghetti sauce filling the house. She hummed a tune, wiping her hands on her apron, looking forward to a peaceful dinner with her husband, Mark. The last few weeks had been calm, and she felt a deep sense of contentment as she thought about the little one growing inside her. She was 6 months pregnant, and although her belly wasn't yet obvious, the glow in her eyes told the story of the joy she was trying to hide. But when the door opened, it was as if her world tilted. Mark walked in, his usual easy smile missing. He seemed flustered, more than usual, his eyes darting nervously. Behind him, a woman stepped into their living room. Samantha stood frozen for a moment, her hand gripping the edge of the counter. She recognized the woman immediately. Chloe. The name sent a chill down her spine. Chloe was someone Mark had been friendly with for months, but she hadn't expected her to cross this line. The woman was young, vibrant, and far too confident for Samantha's liking. She carried herself with an air of superiority, as though she knew exactly where she stood. Mark, oblivious to his wife's presence in the kitchen, went on to introduce Chloe. Samantha, this is Chloe, a colleague from work, he said, the words feeling rehearsed, too forced. Chloe, this is Samantha, my wife. Samantha forced a smile, masking the heart that flashed across her face. She didn't trust the woman, but there was something else in her eyes, a growing sense of betrayal. As they exchanged pleasantries, all Samantha could think about was how long this affair had been going on behind her back. She couldn't bear to watch them together any longer. Without a word, she excused herself, slipping into the bedroom where she locked herself in. Her stomach churned. It felt as though the weight of the pregnancy, of the betrayal, was too much to bear. As she lay on their bed, hidden away from the world, Samantha's mind raced. She couldn't stay. Not like this. Not with the man who had promised to love her, now turning his back on their life together. She hadn't told Mark about the pregnancy yet, unsure of how he would take the news. But now, the thought of raising their child in a house where trust had been shattered felt unbearable. The sound of Mark's voice calling her from the living room broke her out of her trance. His words, full of concern, only heightened her resolve to leave. She had never felt more alone. The door creaked open and Mark entered the bedroom. His face was full of worry. He had no idea that Samantha had seen the entire exchange. "What's wrong with you, Samantha? I thought we were fine." His voice cracked with panic. "You didn't even greet Chloe. What's going on?" Samantha didn't say a word at first. She just stared at him, her mind made up. The trust was gone, and nothing could fix that. Slowly, she stood up from the bed, walking past him towards the closet. Her hands trembled as she packed a small bag, her thoughts clear. "I'm leaving," she said softly, her voice tinged with sadness. "I can't do this anymore." Mark's face drained of color. "No, Samantha, please. Don't do this. I was going to tell you everything, I swear. I was just waiting for the right time." But Samantha shook her head, the pain in her heart evident. "There's no right time for this, Mark. Not after what I saw, not after what you've done." She paused, her eyes flickering with the weight of the secret she was carrying. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark froze, the words hitting him like a hammer. His eyes widened, in shock, and for a brief moment his guilt and panic seemed to consume him. You're you're pregnant?" His voice cracked and he stepped toward her, his hands reaching for her, but she stepped back. Nkechi felt a mix of anger and sorrow flood her chest. "Yes, but I'm leaving. I'm going to take care of myself and the baby. I don't need you anymore." With one last look at the man she had once loved, she turned and walked out. leaving Chijoke standing there, his heart racing with fear and regret. He had lost her. The reality of his actions, of the choices he had made, crashed down on him. Adara was nothing compared to the love he had once had, but it was too late now. As Nkechi stepped out of the house, the sound of the door closing behind her felt like the final chapter of a story that had ended too soon. But it wasn't just her leaving that haunted Chijoke. It was the realization that he might never get the chance to make things right. Chijoke sat on the edge of their bed, his hands trembling as he stared at the empty space where Nkechi had just been. Her scent still lingered in the air, her perfume the gentle fragrance of lavender and roses, reminding him of the life he had almost thrown away. The shock hadn't fully settled in, and the reality of what had happened hit him like a tidal wave. Adora, still standing in the living room, was now an unwelcome presence. She had been eager to meet Enkechi, to claim what she thought was rightfully hers. But now, as she saw Chijoke sitting there in turmoil, her excitement began to wane. "You need to go, Adora," Chijoke said, his voice hoarse. "I'll talk to you later." Adaura frowned, clearly annoyed. "What do you mean, talk later? What's going on? You've been acting weird all evening." Chijoke stood up, walking past her without another word. His mind was in a storm, battling between regret and anger, but most of all, confusion. He didn't want to lose Ankechi, but how could he fix what he had done? How could he undo the hurt he had caused? Outside, Nkechi walked through the quiet streets, the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. She had always dreamed of a peaceful life, a life with Chijoke, a life with their baby. But now, all of those dreams felt like shattered glass beneath her feet. As she reached the bus stop, she sat on the bench, clutching her stomach as a tear slipped down her cheek. She couldn't bring herself to contact her family just yet. She needed time to think. She couldn't bear the thought of going back to her mother's house and facing their questions. What would she say? That her husband had betrayed her? That the man she had loved had pushed her aside for someone else? The shame would be unbearable. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her from her thoughts. It was a message from Chijoke. "Nkechi, please don't leave. Let's talk. I'm sorry. I made a huge mistake. Please." Her thumb hovered over the screen, but she didn't respond. There were no more words to say. She had made her choice. There was nothing left to fix. The days that followed were filled with emptiness. Nkechi moved into a small rented apartment on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, but it was her own space. No more pretending, no more smiles, for a man who no longer deserved them. She spent the days in solitude, focusing on her health, on her pregnancy, trying to prepare herself for the life ahead, but her heart was heavy with grief. She missed her husband, the man she had once trusted with everything, but she knew she couldn't go back to him. Chijoke, on the other hand, was drowning in panic. He hadn't seen Nkechi since she left, and every attempt to contact her had been met with silence. His job, his friends, and even Adaora, none of it mattered. It felt like the walls were closing in on him. He had made a terrible mistake, and now he was paying for it. One evening, Chijoke stood outside the small apartment building where Nkechi had taken refuge. He had gathered all his courage, knowing this might be his last chance to make things right. He knocked on the door, his heart racing in his chest. When Nkechi opened the door, her face was a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. She stared at him for a long moment, not saying a word. "I'm sorry, Nkechi," Chijoke said, his voice cracking. "I have messed up, and I don't deserve a second chance, but please, I need you to know that I love you. I love you more than anything, and I was stupid. I was selfish. Please let me make it right." Nkechi shook her head, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. You don't get it, Chijioke. You had your chance. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I can't go back. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me, who doesn't value me. I thought I meant something to you, but you threw me away. Mark's face contorted in anguish. I didn't throw you away. Please don't say that. I never wanted to hurt you. I was just lost. I didn't know what I was doing. But Samantha wasn't listening. She couldn't. She had given him every part of herself, and he had broken it. He had shattered their trust. I'm pregnant, Mark, she said softly, her voice steady but filled with pain. And I don't need you. I don't need anyone to take care of me. I'll do this on my own. The words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. Mark stood there, paralyzed by the gravity of her statement. He had no idea how to fix what he had done. No amount of begging would ever change the fact that he had betrayed her trust. Samantha closed the door in his face, leaving him standing alone in the hallway, the silence swallowing him whole. 2 weeks passed, and Mark's desperation grew. He had stopped going to work, ignoring calls and messages. His friends stopped checking in on him, and Chloe, who had once seemed like an exciting distraction, had now become nothing more than an inconvenience. She had sensed the shift in Mark's priority, his focus now entirely on Samantha, and she was growing restless. One evening, after receiving yet another cold shoulder from Mark, Chloe finally confronted him. What's going on with you? She demanded, her hands on her hips. You've been distant. You don't return my calls. And now you're acting like you don't even care about me. What happened to the man I met? Mark stared at her, the weight of his guilt suffocating him. Chloe, please, I can't do this right now. I don't need you here. What do you mean you don't need me? Chloe scoffed. Is it because of her, that wife of yours, you think I don't see what's going on? I'm not some second choice, Mark. I'm not going to stand around waiting for you to fix things with her. Mark felt a pang of guilt, but it was nothing compared to the crushing feeling in his chest when he thought about Samantha. Chloe had been a mistake, one that had led him to this disastrous point. He didn't want to hurt her, but he knew he could never be with her. I'm sorry, Chloe, he said quietly. I made a terrible mistake. I need to fix what I've broken with Samantha. I can't be with you. I don't want to be with you. Chloe stared at him in disbelief, her face flushing with anger. You're really going to throw everything away for her, for the woman who just walked out on you? Fine, Mark, fine. And just like that, she was gone, leaving Mark to face the consequences of his actions alone. The weight of his choices hung over him, and he realized just how much he had to lose. Would Samantha ever forgive him? Would he ever have a chance to rebuild what he had so carelessly broken? Only time would tell. Days turned into weeks, and the emptiness that Mark felt since Samantha's departure only deepened. He found himself sitting alone in their once shared home, unable to sleep, unable to think straight. The absence of her presence was suffocating, and the thought of her being out there, carrying their child alone, was a torment he could not escape. He spent countless nights pacing the house, replaying every moment, every word he had said to her in his mind. He wondered what might have happened if he had been honest from the beginning. What if he had never gotten involved with Chloe? What if he had given Samantha the attention and respect she deserved? Mark's guilt gnawed at him. Every message he sent to Samantha went unanswered. Every phone call was ignored. She had cut him out of her life completely, and he knew she had every right to do so. But that didn't make it any easier. The more he tried to reach out, the more he realized how much damage he had caused. He had built walls between them, walls that might never come down. Meanwhile, Samantha was slowly adjusting to a new life. The small apartment she had rented became her sanctuary, a place where she could finally breathe, where she could grow into the mother she needed to be. She had found peace in solitude, though it was often accompanied by the anxiety of what the future would hold. Her pregnancy had become her priority, and she focused on preparing for the arrival of her baby. She had been strong, but the loneliness she felt was hard to ignore. When she closed her eyes at night, she sometimes imagined a world where Mark hadn't betrayed her, a world where their child would grow up with both parents. But that world seemed like a distant dream, one that could never be real again. It was a rainy afternoon when Mark received the phone call. The storm had passed, but the clouds still loomed overhead, casting a gloomy shadow over the city. He had spent the day pacing, consumed by the overwhelming feeling of loss. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Samantha. His heart skipped a beat as he answered, his voice trembling. Samantha, is that you? There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke, her voice soft but firm. Mark, I didn't want to tell you this over the phone, but I think you need to know. His chest tightened with anticipation. What is it? Is everything okay? I'm due in a month, Samantha said quietly, and I think it's time we talked, for the sake of the baby. Mark felt his breath catch. The words felt like a lifeline, a chance to make amends, but also a reminder of everything he had lost. I'm coming. I'll be there as soon as I can. But as he hung up, he was hit with a mix of emotions, fear, hope, and uncertainty. What did this mean for them? Could they move past the betrayal? Could Samantha ever trust him again? The weeks that followed were filled with difficult conversation and moments of vulnerability. Mark moved back into the house. Though things were far from normal, there were still walls between them, walls of hurt and distrust, but they began to slowly chip away at them. Mark proved his commitment to Samantha by being there for her during the remainder of her pregnancy. He attended every doctor's appointment, helped her with the preparation for the baby, and made sure she knew he was there to support her every step of the way. His actions spoke louder than words, and little by little, Samantha began to see the man she had once loved. On the day their baby was born, a new chapter began for them. The moment they held their child in their arms, everything changed. The pain of the past was still there, but the love for their child brought a sense of healing they hadn't anticipated. Samantha looked at Mark with a mixture of uncertainty and hope, but in her heart, she knew they were taking things one day at a time. As the days passed, Mark continued to show that he was willing to work for their future. He was patient, understanding, and most importantly, committed to proving to Samantha that he could be the man she needed. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no guarantees, but for the first time in months, both of them felt that perhaps, just perhaps, there could be a new beginning, a future built not on past mistakes but on the lessons they had learned together. Months passed, and the road to rebuilding their relationship wasn't always smooth. There were still moments of tension, especially when old wounds were reopened or when trust seemed to waver. But Mark and Samantha kept working at it, taking things slowly, one step at a time. Their baby, a beautiful baby boy they named Ethan, became the center of their world, and his presence, more than anything, pushed them to move forward. Mark had become a more attentive husband and father. He spent long nights with Samantha, caring for Ethan, helping her with the baby, and making up for the time he had wasted on selfish desires. For Samantha, watching Mark take responsibility and truly show up for her and their son slowly softened the walls she had built around her heart. Yet, there were moments when the weight of his betrayal still lingered. Sometimes, when Mark was too distant or lost in his thoughts, Samantha would find herself reminded of the pain, of the uncertainty she had felt when she had made the decision to leave. The doubt crept back in, and she would pull away, silently struggling with whether she could trust him again. But with time, they learned to communicate better. The hurt of the past didn't disappear overnight, but with every honest conversation, every shared experience, they began to heal. Mark found himself waking up every morning with a new sense of purpose. He had lost his way once, but now his priorities were clear. He was committed to Samantha and Ethan. He understood that love was not just about saying the right things, it was about showing up consistently and doing the hard work when it mattered most. His relationship with Samantha had been tested in ways he never imagined, but he knew that this was the love he wanted to fight for. As the months went by, they both took the time to rediscover each other, to rebuild the connection they had once shared. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. The scars of the past were still there, but they were learning to live with them. They learned that forgiveness was not an instant fix. It was a process, a journey that had to be walked hand in hand. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, Mark holding Ethan in his arms while Samantha sat beside him, they shared a moment of quiet contentment. The sounds of their son's laughter filled the air, and for the first time in a long while, there was peace between them. I'm sorry for everything, Samantha, Mark said softly, his voice full of sincerity. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll spend every day of my life proving to you that I'm the man you thought I was. Samantha looked at him, her eyes softening as she reached out to touch his hand. We've both made mistakes, Mark, but I'm learning to forgive, not just you, but myself too. I can't change what happened, but I can decide how to move forward. And right now, I choose to move forward with you. The words felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The path ahead was still uncertain, but there was hope now, a hope that they could rebuild, that they could create something stronger from the ashes of their past. She had given him a chance to prove himself, and slowly he was doing just that. They both knew that life wasn't perfect. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and times when they would need to lean on each other for strength, but the foundation they were building was rooted in the love for their son and the commitment to each other. Mark looked down at their son, his heart swelling with emotion. We're going to be okay, Samantha, he whispered, more to himself than to her. We're going to be okay. And for the first time in a long time, Samantha believed him. A year had passed since that fateful day when Samantha had walked out of their home, pregnant and heartbroken. Now, looking back, she could hardly recognize the person she had been. The pain had not disappeared, but it had lessened. The trust that had been broken had not been fully restored, but it was being rebuilt piece by piece. Mark had stayed true to his word. He had become a dependable partner, a loving father, and a man who no longer took his family for granted. The lessons he had learned were written into his actions, and each day he worked to make things right. Samantha still carried her scars, but they no longer defined her. She had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. The journey had been long, but it had shaped her in ways she could never have imagined. One evening, as they sat together in their home, their son nestled comfortably in his crib. They looked at each other, their eyes meeting with understanding. There was no need for words. Their love had been tested, but it had survived. For Samantha, the path to healing had been a long one, but she had found the strength to forgive, to move forward, and to embrace the new life they were building. For Mark, it was a reminder of how precious love could be and how fragile trust was once broken. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew they were in it together, and that in itself was enough. The church was still, almost suffocating in its silence. Lara lay motionless on the cold stone floor, her white wedding dress fanned out around her like a broken halo. The guests, once excited for the union of two souls, now looked on in stunned horror. Their murmurs filled the air, though no one dared to move or speak too loudly. afraid of disturbing the fragile, tense moment. Mark, the groom, was on his knees beside her, his hand shaking as he reached out to gently touch her face. His eyes were wide with panic, searching for any sign of life, any flicker of awareness. His voice, strained with emotion, barely managed to break through the silence. Lara, please, please wake up, he whispered, desperation creeping into his tone. His heart raced as he looked around, but the faces of the guests remained frozen in disbelief. No one knew how to react, and the ceremony had come to an unexpected and horrifying halt. The priest, who had been standing at the altar, quickly approached the scene. His usual calm demeanor had evaporated, replaced by concern. He knelt beside Mark and Lara, his voice gentle yet firm. "We need to get her help immediately," he said, trying to maintain some level of control over the situation. His gaze darted around the room, signaling to the wedding planner and attendants who were still standing at the back, unsure of what to do next. One of the guests quickly rushed to the door, calling for an ambulance. As Mark continued to kneel, helpless, Lara's condition seemed to remain unchanged. His mind raced with countless questions, none of which had answers. What had happened? Was this some sort of cruel prank, a twist of fate, or something more? But as the seconds ticked by, Mark felt a growing sense of dread. His heart clenched with the terrifying thought that he might lose her before they even had the chance to begin their lives together. In the meantime, the guests had begun whispering amongst themselves, some expressing sympathy, while others exchanged worried glances. Yet, despite the chaos and confusion, one thing became clear to Mark. No matter what had caused this moment, the truth had been sealed in this moment. The wedding, the promises, the hopes they had once shared had all come crashing down with Lara's collapse, and as the siren wailed faintly in the distance, Mark couldn't help but wonder if he would ever understand the full story behind Lara's sudden fall, or the consequences that awaited them both. The world had stopped spinning, and everything he had once thought to be certain